Thank you. Mr. Secretary, your schedule only allows me 5 minutes for questions, so I'm going to try to be concise and help you be concise in your answers. But you made a statement that this will be a test of whether reducing the deficit is about talk or action. And I just want to be clear, we welcome a conversation with you or the President about serious deficit reduction. We wish we could have had it before the President pushed through an $800 billion stimulus package that many of us believe was ill-advised, or a health care bill that's putting a lot of our employers out of business. But be that as it may, we want to reduce the deficit. We just don't want to do it on the backs of the men and women that are fighting for this country every day. And to answer the ranking member's question he put before us, what wouldn't you have voted for? I wouldn't have voted for that $800 billion stimulus package, which contained almost twice what these cuts were, and I'd repeal the health care bill tomorrow. But let's look at the approach of how we got here. And wouldn't you agree that if we had been more responsible in handling our budget as a federal government, that the better approach would have been for us to have developed a national strategy, Department of Defense developed a national strategy to defend the country, to be able to discuss exactly what we needed for that strategy, to determine what the resources would be in order to meet that strategy, and then come to Congress and say, this is what we need to do in order to do that job, to defend the country. Wouldn't you have agreed that that would have been a better approach?
Congressman, a better approach, and I say this not so much as Secretary of Defense, but as a former OMB director and chairman of the House Budget Committee. The better approach would have been for Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, and the President, to sit down and develop a comprehensive deficit reduction package.
And Mr. Secretary, I understand that, but I'm talking about as far as the strategy. Wouldn't it have been a better approach to have done it in the manner that I just delineated?
That would have been nice, but we were mandated to come up with $487
I understand
billion.
that. But wouldn't that have been the better approach?
Of course.
Okay. And then, in point of fact, as you mentioned, that's not the approach we took. What we did was to give you $487 billion of cuts, and then you were forced to create a strategy that worked within the parameters of those cuts. Is that correct?
That's right.
And then based on that, Mr. Secretary, isn't it true that it would be virtually impossible for you or anyone else testifying on behalf of this budget to delineate for us the portion of that strategy that was driven by those budget cuts versus the portion of the strategy that was driven by security changes around the world?
Look, I don't think you have to make a choice between fiscal discipline and national security. I really don't.
No, and Mr. Secretary, I'm just trying to, because of my 5 minutes. Isn't it true, though, as you said, you were forced to have $487 billion of cuts. You worked a strategy that worked within those parameters. But isn't it virtually impossible for you or anyone else to tell us what portion of that strategy was driven by that $487 billion of cuts versus just security changes that took place around the world?
As I said, we would have been required to look at a change in strategy under any circumstances because of the drawdowns that were taking place.
I understand that.
This is not just a deficit reduction.
And we have two different components. We have security changes that would have had strategy change, and we have budget cuts that would have cost it. But isn't it true that you can't delineate between those two?
Well, they were both involved in determining our strategy.
Exactly. Now, you also mentioned the fact that this was imposed on you by law. I know I've heard you state before this wouldn't have been the figure you would have picked, the $487 billion.
That's for sure.
That's for sure. I wouldn't have picked that, and I didn't vote for that figure. But you've had a lot of discussions with the President. You heard Mr. Thornberry say the President came out and said he wanted $400 billion of cuts before the strategic cut was taking place. In your discussions with the President and looking at this strategy, at any time has the President ever voiced to you the fact that he thought this $487 billion of cuts was too much?
I think the President understood that this was not going to be easy and that there would be risk involved.
I understand that. That's not my question. Did the President ever voice to you the fact that he felt this $487 billion in cuts was too much?
He felt, as I did, that the Congress and the President had gone forward with this Budget Control Act, and we were obligated to fulfill it.
And had he, you disagree with that figure, I disagree with that figure, had the President disagreed with that figure, could he not have put any of those cuts back into the budget that he has just presented to Congress?
I think the President shared your concern, which is what do we do about reducing the deficit?
Did he put any of those cuts back into this budget?
That was worked out by the Congress on a bipartisan basis.
Did he put any of those cuts back into this budget? Any of the cuts made, did he roll them back and say, that was too much, I'm going to put them back in the budget? And my time is up. Thank you, Mr.
I don't think he could have done that without the support of the Congress.
Thank you.